So it is time to discuss about the opportunity of next session, which is very important for the Thai investments and also the opportunity to invest in CLMV countries. All right, the topic would be the dynamics of Thailand upcountry economy. The panelists once again in this session are including Kun Janice Van Ekeren, CEO Bank of Ayutthaya Public Company Limited, Kun Wanchak Buranasiri, Chief Operating Officer from Sansiri Public Company Limited, Kun Supawadee Punsri, Senior Director, Bank of Thailand, and the panel discussion will run by our moderator, Dr.Pipat Luengnaruemitchai from Phatra Securities Public Company Limited. May I now invite all panelists and our moderator on the stage to discuss the opportunity. Please welcome all the panelists. Thank you.
Welcome back to the second session of this afternoon. Over the next 50 minutes, I think we will be talking about the dynamics of the upcountry economy. I think that's be interesting topics, and we're quite privileged to have our expert panelists here. Let me have the quick introduction to each of the panelists. Our first panelist, Kun Supawadee, she's the Senior Director of Bank of Thailand Northern Region. So she's in Chiang Mai, and she has lots of experience in Chiang Mai. And her responsibility is analyzing the economic situation in the northern region of Thailand. So I think she would give us lots of perspective from the central banker and as well as someone who's in the region. Please welcome Kun Supawadee. Our second panelist, she's a Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of Ayutthaya, or what we know as Bank Krungsri in Thai. It's the fifth largest commercial bank and soon to be bigger. And she's been in Thailand for 6 years, I believe, before serving as a CEO of the bank. She was the CFO of the bank, so she has lots of experience in Thailand, and she could give us the perspective of a commercial banker and as well as someone who used to live outside of Thailand and how things are going here in Thailand. Please welcome Kun Janice. And our final panelist here, he's the Chief Operating Officer of Sansiri. I think it's one of the fastest growing real estate developers in Thailand. And he's responsible for basically the company operation. So he has lots of hands-on experience and he has a lot to share with us today from the perspective of the developer. Please welcome Kun Wanchak. So let me begin our discussion today. I think in the distant past, I think everybody know that the economic and business development has been concentrated in Bangkok, and people know of Thailand as Bangkok and Bangkok of Thailand. But in recent past, in the past several years, I think the upcountry economy has been catching up, and the growth has been the big growth driver for the Thai economy. And rising income of the people over there has been changing their consumption spending and changing how companies are doing business over there. And we as a Phatra take the urbanization, development of the new cities and urban cities around outside of Bangkok as one of the key themes that would support the long-term growth of Thailand and of course the corporate earnings. But recently with the market volatility picking up, I think investors seem to lose some faith in the urbanization theme and consumption growth of Thailand. So I think it's quite timely to talk about this today. And let me start off first question, and I would ask each of the panelists a broad question, and they could give us some picture about, do they think that the urbanization is a long-term theme for Thailand, or is it just a short-term hype that investors were excited about? So Kun Supawadee, let me start with you. You have been following the economic data in Chiang Mai and elsewhere in Thailand, and as a central banker and someone who has the direct experience in the upcountry economy, what do you see as the key changes, and what is changing over there? What are the drivers for these changes, and do you think it's a long-term trend or not?
Okay, I'm having some slides coming up, but before the slide comes up, I can probably say a little bit about the overview of the upcountry economy size, because I guess you probably, everybody think of Bangkok when you come to Thailand, but let me go over the economy size, the growth, and the size of the population of the upcountry economy so that you have some good idea of the size compare of the whole country. If we go to, and we can skip to slide 4, you can see that I'm talking more about the 3 regions of the economy. I mean the north, the northeastern, and the southern region, because Bangkok. If you see Bangkok and vicinities comprise of the GDP, what we call gross regional product is about 44% of the GDP of the whole country. And if you look at the 3 regions, it's about 1/3 of the GDP, right? And another thing that I would like to mention is that the growth of the upcountry economy pretty much are from the private consumption and the government expenditure. We didn't rely so much on the exports like the whole country. So I have to say, if you go look at the next slide, you can see the growth line, the GDP growth of the 3 regions is of smoother curves. The country's curve is pretty much up and down, because we trade with the global economy, but the regional economies, we have our own domestic growth and private consumption. So the curve is pretty much smoother. So I can probably say, because I'm in Chiang Mai for about 2 years now, I have a bit of a bias, so we're a bit more resilient than the country. Another reason why, the next chart will show that we have about 2/3 of the population of the whole country. So there's a great potential that these population will move more to the urban areas. And another thing that I would like to share with you is that in the upcountry economy, we are more diversified in the sense that compared with the whole of Thailand, you may know already that our industrial and manufacturing sector comprises of like 30% of the GDP. And agriculture is only 8%. But upcountry, we're more diversified. Industry and manufacturing sector is only about 16% of upcountry economy. Agriculture is still about 20%. And one interesting thing is education. We have people from Bangkok and all over the place studying, in big cities, in Khon Kaen, Mahasarakham, and Chiang Mai. So education, the GRP from education is about 9% of the GRP of the upcountry economy. This is just one different things that I would like to share with you. So this just showed that there's potential, great potential for the upcountry economy to grow from here. Because we start from a small pie to see, and in a growing pie, I hope that we can have a better share. And if you look at what drives the upcountry economy recently, I have to say that even though we don't export so much to other countries in the globe, but we export a lot more with our neighbor country, especially after Myanmar opens up her country. If you look at this chart, the export growth, is about 20% plus in the past 2 years. And this year, the growth is slowing down a little bit to about 8%. But I have to say that because there's a big flood in Mae Sot of Tak province for about 2 weeks. And we export goods from there a lot. So that's why the growth is slowing down a bit. But it's still very decent compared with the negative growth of the export of Thailand. So we're quite a cushion, and we're quite resilient in terms of our diversification along different sectors of the economy. And if you look at the investment, one other thing is that I think the private sector, after listening to all our previous guest lecturers, we can see that the private sector have seen this growth potential in the big cities. So, you can see that there are new developments, new condos, building new houses in these, big cities of the upcountry, in the urban area, Khon Kaen, Udon Thani, Songkhla, and Chiang Mai. So many new units are being built. Besides the condominiums, we have real estate, the houses And another thing are shopping malls. In Chiang Mai, we have 3 big shopping malls being built at the moment. One interesting thing is that we have a shopping mall called Promenade. It's owned by the Netherlands groups. And it's interesting that they must have seen the potential of Chiang Mai and upcountry connecting to China and other countries. So it's the first place that they are investing in Thailand is in Chiang Mai. And besides shopping malls, hospitals, Chiang Mai has a vision to be a medical hub for the neighboring countries and to serve, the southern part of China as well. Even Chiang Mai University got some budget of like 2 billion baht to build a new CPAT medical center. It's being built right now. It's about like 450 beds hospital. It's quite a huge function. So, it's all fronts, not just condos and houses, but, we have shopping malls. We have modern trades coming in, to Chiang Mai, Khon Kaen, and different places, and different big cities as well. And another promising prospect that helps support all these developments are the tourism industry. The growth is along with the country, it's about 20% in different regions. Sorry, well, it's slowing down a bit, but the latest figure of Chiang Mai is back to about 20%. And maybe I should stop here for the time being.
Okay, so that's a broad-based growth that you kind of see over there. Okay, let me turn to you, Janice. I think your bank has an extensive network. I think some 55% of your bank branches are outside Bangkok. It's a greater area. You must see lots of opportunities in terms of business outside of Bangkok. What's your view about upcountry economy, the urbanization and everything? What do you think this is a long-term trend for Thailand?
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Pipat. It's really a pleasure to be here. I would say that what we're seeing in terms of trends from the banking perspective very much echoes the economic statistics that you were sharing with us. If we look overall, what we consider to be urban, we consider it to be population centers with more than 50,000 people. So if you look at Thailand right now today, that's roughly 30 communities. And we do see those communities growing. I wanted to share a number of statistics with you because I think that helps to understand and see the trends. One of the things, as Dr. Pipat mentioned, this is now into my 7th year here in Thailand. We've had a lot of economic ups and downs. But as you look at the trend, Thailand is very resilient, and it keeps coming back again and again, and it keeps coming back stronger. And what I think has been very memorable about Thailand is that it doesn't tend to have strong overheating. As you look over the last 16 years, we've had moderated growth, and I think you're going to continue to see that as we go forward. So as we look at urbanization today, from our perspective, we think about 34% of the Thai population today resides in urban areas, and we see that growing at about 1.8% over the next 3, 4, 5 years. So we think that's going to be a consistent trend. It's interesting, we see income growing faster upcountry than Bangkok. Certainly Bangkok income levels are much higher and will remain higher, but that gap continues to close. And that's offering basically more opportunities for consumers. When we look at urban consumers, we define them as individuals that are earning more than 15,000 baht per month. Under current rules of the Bank of Thailand, that's the current level where you can have a credit card. So as the people move in, and we've had minimum wage increases in both 2012 and 2013, you see more customers that are coming into this area. And as a result, you see a much more stronger potential for consumption and for business and farming development going forward. When you look at the number of households in Thailand, we've actually seen over the last 5 years 2.4% growth in the number of households. Only 0.3% of that's been in Bangkok. So the vast majority of the growth in households has actually been upcountry. A couple of the key things I wanted to point to from a commercial banking perspective. If you look at the distribution channels today across Thailand, branches have continued to expand. You mentioned earlier we have 55%. Over the last several years, we've actually been putting most of our new branches have been going into upcountry areas. So that trend is accelerating, and I think you're going to see more of that going forward. With ATMs or access to cash, that has been even more pronounced. So we've added over 750 more ATMs upcountry. Overall, for the whole industry, you've seen 103% growth in ATMs upcountry in Thailand versus roughly 53% in the Bangkok metropolitan area. So I think that's very telling of what you're seeing in terms of trends. One thing that we're also doing in the bank is we're really expanding beyond to see how we reach consumers going forward. So it's not just about the branch footprint or the ATMs going forward. We see mobile banking, both from online channels and from actually mobile phones, is growing substantially. We see this as a big area. This makes banking accessible to many of the urban areas, particularly with the increase in traffic that we're seeing in those areas. So banking is becoming more accessible as you see the population grow. If I shift to products and talk a little bit about products, I mentioned earlier we look at urban consumers as being over 15,000 baht. Our credit card franchise is the #1 largest franchise in Thailand. We've actually seen the number of credit card accounts grow over the last 5 years by 30%. The outstanding balances have grown by 38%, and the actual volume is gone 43%. So what you're seeing is more urban consumers, and they're actually shifting from a cash-based society that we've traditionally been to more of electronic base. So you see that being much more widely accepted, and it's not just used for actual borrowing, it's actually used as a payment pattern. So that's clearly one trend we see upcountry as we go forward. I think what's even more telling, and you referenced this with the shopping centers, we see that with our partners too. Central Department Store, Tesco Lotus, Home Pro are all expanding strongly upcountry. I think Tesco Lotus is a fantastic example. In upcountry, they've gone from 150 outlets 5 years ago to 879 outlets as of last year. That's over a 56% annual growth rate upcountry versus 14% in Bangkok. So I think the trend for growth is alive and well in the urban community. You mentioned mortgages as well, and I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say. We see a couple trends there. As we look at mortgages, we actually see our numbers going up 17% in terms of upcountry versus only about 11% in Bangkok. So the trend currently is moving in that direction. The other trend that we see, which I'm sure you're seeing as well, is a strong trend from self-built homes upcountry, which used to be the trend now, to developer properties. And so I think that is a trend that's going to continue. Overall, as a result, we're seeing customers upcountry grow, and we're seeing their use of banking services grow. Banking products per customer upcountry have grown strongly from 2.5 for us several years ago to 2.9. And I think maybe one of the most telling for me is as we talk about Set in the City and the road tours, you've seen upcountry an increase in the number of trips, in the participation, and in the diversity of where the set's going. So I think that actually all leads to a positive trend for urbanization going forward.
Great. We also see foreign investors coming to Thailand asking for trips to go to like Khon Kaen, Udon, Chiang Mai, and so that's a good trend. Okay, let them turn to Wanchak. What's your view on that as a developer? Do you see the same trend going on in terms of the real estate market?
Well, thank you. I have quite an easy job because the groundwork's been laid by Janice and Supawadee. Basically, the growth that we've seen in the last couple of years that we've been in the upcountry is that there is a clear demographic change and lifestyle change within the communities in the upcountry. We see that. I do have some slides, but I'm not sure whether they're coming up. Okay. This is one of the slides that we use in our presentation. You can see that, as Janice said, the income from Bangkok is, although it's the highest, it has the lowest growth of around 35%, whereas all the other provinces are growing much faster, and the gap is as Janice said, is narrowing. And on the right-hand side is the GRP of the Bangkok portion that represents to the national GDP. It's in the last 11 or so years has fallen from about 51% to around 44%. So the importance of upcountry economy is growing. As Supawadee said, I'm very glad that she said about the education. The trend now is that the rural people are no longer dependent on Bangkok as a center stage anymore. True, Bangkok education is probably the first choice, but not reaching the first choice, instead of trying again second choice and third choice in Bangkok, now they're moving away. They are happy to stay home and be educated in the locally. Another significant trend is the availability of the low-cost airline flights and destinations. It has grown quite substantially. The three major airliners, Thai, AirAsia, and Nok Air, covers more than 25 destinations. And as we go, Janice said also to retail, because of the purchasing power of the rural people has grown, so has the retail. Another interesting statistic is that the top 8 retail conglomerates has grown 100% over the last 7 years. So the picture, the image that you have of the rural people being, just farmers and basically outback people is no longer the case. People are more brand conscious. They are more easygoing. They do shop in the branded stores, and they do go out more to have dinner outside rather than staying in. So it's more of an urban trend. It's more like the Bangkok living. You don't stay at home having dinner with your family anymore. Another interesting statistic in terms of demographic is that number of persons per household are getting smaller and smaller. I think it's a culture shift similar to Bangkok, in the sense that maybe 10, 15 years ago, it's not just the children are not wanting to live away from home. It's more the parents allowing children to live away from home. Nowadays, I think the practice is more acceptable. Parents are willing to have their kids stay away from home, especially in Bangkok, staying weekdays in a city. But for upcountry, condominiums are more acceptable as a place of living. So people are spending away from their home. A little bit about Sansiri. We've expanded very aggressively outside of Bangkok, evidently in the last 2 years. In 2011, we used to be around almost about 90% in Bangkok and about 10% outside of Bangkok. And we realized that the growth that we want to deliver has to come from upcountry if you want a stronger growth, because we believe the Bangkok market is a bit mature and a bit more saturated. So we believe the growth in Bangkok is still available, but not that much. So in 2011, we started expanding in upcountry, and as you can see, about 40% upcountry in 2012 and 2013. But the mix is a bit different. Last year, it used to be about half, about 20% in the as in holiday homes market, and about half in the localized market. This year, we have shifted more focus on the urbanization play. And we believe that that's the trend that's going to go forward, that it's going to be sustainable. So we're expecting about 35 to 45% mix of upcountry market going forward.
So from that trend, I think the upcountry market that we're talking about is still limited to the big cities outside Bangkok, right? So,
yes.
still like I'm talking about like in northern area would be only Chiang Mai and not much elsewhere. Right?
Yes.
Is that the case or?
Well, we've divided into tiers, of course. The bigger population, the more bigger the market. So we put them in tier 1. Unfortunately, I don't have the slides for that. But we do grade them. Obviously, the better ones we do go first. And once we have maybe exhausted the demand, then we move on to a new location. We used to be around 5 to 6 locations last year. We are now more than 15.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And so let me come back to you. We talk about the changes we witnessed over the past several years. What do you see in terms of the outlook going forward, and what would be the key driver that going to drive this trend going forward?
Let me go back to my slide number 12 about urbanization factors. Well, the key drivers, one is the government policy that has been mentioned by earlier in the earlier presentation, especially by the Deputy Prime Minister. So we are having a lot of rail and roads project connecting Bangkok through major cities up in the north, in the northeastern, and in the south. So that's one kind of policies that will help people move out of Bangkok to live in big cities. And another, I shouldn't forget, another major factor would be the big flood that we had in the central region and in Bangkok 1 or 2 years ago. So that's one of the driving factors for people to buy second homes in area where with a higher level from the sea, like Chiang Mai is about 600 meters up from the sea level. So Chiang Mai property, condominiums have been selling so well. There are a bit of oversupply at the moment, but still, I think developers like Sansiri knows very well of where to slow down, and now the market is correcting itself a little bit. But the potential for urbanization there is, it's really here to stay. The second factor is, Dr. Pansak talked a lot about China. That we are connecting with them. But in fact, I would tell you another view that China also would like to connect with us. We have ASEAN-China FTA in 2010. And China has already built major road system like R3, R3A to connect with our Ponyo-Tin highway, and we're just waiting for the bridge to open up, and then the transportation down from China to Thailand would be a lot easier. Even now, in Chiang Mai, you see, I see with my own eyes several times earlier in the year that there's really a caravan of cars of Chinese tourists driving in cars. They come in I think one caravan has probably 30 or 40 cars. And besides cars, they come through flights. There are many more direct flights from Kunming or from Shanghai to Chiang Mai these days. So, China itself is, building the link to come down to Thailand, Myanmar, and Laos as well. And as I mentioned already, Myanmar has opened the country, and because we have such a long border, I think over 2,000 kilometers along the borders, and the checkpoint, we have opened up more permanent custom checkpoints at some of our bordering towns, and those are the area where people trade freely. I mean, they trade a lot, over the bridge across, because I went to see those, and it's just so vibrant. You have to see them themselves, and that people are, we've been good neighbors with Myanmar for a long time already. So when you open up the permanent checkpoints, and it opens up, better opportunity. The trade flows more easily, and of course, the bigger picture would be the AEC itself. That would come into play, because when you can, there's an expectation that we can trade more with Myanmar, and with Laos and with Cambodia. So the positive sentiment is one of the driving force for the cities in the upcountry economy to grow. And so this is just a small chart to see that their economies are growing much better than ours at the moment. Like Myanmar I think this is a forecast by the Economics Intelligence Unit. They are expecting to, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, and Vietnam, they're all growing more than 5% in GDP. And another major driving force is tourism. We have a lot more Chinese tourists coming in. They were walking about all over the place in Chiang Mai. Besides, I told you about the caravans already, but I was so surprised when I went into Chiang Mai University to attend a meeting, and there were Chinese tourists walking about in Chiang Mai universities, because I heard that there's a scene in this movie, Lost in Thailand, that was shown earlier in the year. This movie, you know, I haven't watched it yet, but it's such a debut. I heard that they earn like 5 billion yuan.
Right.
And a lot of Chinese tourists, you know, some of my colleagues were talking about they came partly because of this movie, because I saw the trailer. You know, I think the photography is excellent there. Every scene about Thailand in the movie is so beautiful. I mean, if I were a Chinese tourist, I would have to come to Thailand. So tourism industry is really here to stay, and we have our own Thainess, Thai hospitality, Thai food, you know, anything, and different regions has different things, you know, like the northern Isan food has some, you know, nice flavors, the southern food, the northern food. So these are really here to stay and will help the major cities growing better, you know, to receive tourists.
Okay, thank you. But as a central banker, you cannot be too optimistic, right? There must be some concerns or risks that in the back of your mind when you say those things, right?
Well, yes, we've seen that as Janice mentioned, you know, the credit growth in the northern, I don't remember all other regions so well, but let me tell you about the north. You know, we see credit growth in the real estate sector growing something about 20%. But, you know, for the timing we've been monitoring, but and I'm not, you know, we monitor it closely, but for the time being, I think it's from the real demand. And, you know, commercial banks are rather stringent on their credit extension already, as we can see, you know. So those who come out and buy condos or houses in these big cities, of course, you know, we talk to developers. They say that some of them are really for speculation, for investment, but, you know, majority of them are really, you know, to build as, you know, to buy these for second homes. And as Kun Wanchak mentioned, you know, some of the change in the lifestyles, and for the time being, condominiums in Chiang Mai is not too expensive yet. For parents who send their children to universities in Chiang Mai, instead of renting, these days they pay up a little bit more and they can buy condos. So, you know, that's just one other factor that would help support the urbanization. And once people live there, you know, they probably would stay on and to live and work in Chiang Mai for a while because they already have housing. So that would support the urbanization of big cities like this. And Khon Kaen and Maharasakham is a similar picture. Khon Kaen growth in condo is quite large. So, but I think part of that is for the same reason. And because Khon Kaen is next to Laos as well. And there's a great opportunity for trade and services around that. And you know, the urbanization, Kun Janice already mentioned, we got the same number. You know, our urban population is only about 1/3. So there's a huge potential. If you look at my slide 20, it will just build on what you mentioned. The world average is 50%, but for Thailand it's only about 34%. So there's a huge potential that people would live more in the city. And even for China, you know, they have, I think about half of their population live in urban area already. But I was just reading in the newspaper a few weeks earlier that there's a trend, it's like a government guideline to drive 400 million more people to live in the urban areas. Because once people live together, they tend to be more productive. And, you know, when you come together, then you can, you know, think of doing business, and different other services will grow along with that. So I think it's really a long-term trend to stay, and more potential that we can have at least 20% more of urban population, you know, to go along with the world average.
Thank you. And Kun Janice, do you share the view in terms of outlook and risk going forward? Any concern that you may have from the commercial banking?
I'm going to get this question in the next couple of days, so I'm going to answer a couple questions that typically we do here.
Right.
One, mortgage. You touched on that. It's very interesting, actually. One of the questions we get are, how many mortgages do you underwrite per person? And is there speculation going on in terms of people applying for multiple mortgages? And we do see that, but the trend is just as you point out. It's not for investment purposes. They're actually buying them for their children. So you see people that are coming in, and they may have 1, 2, or 3 different mortgages with us, but they're all considered owner-occupied because it may be the parents, and then they have a condo for their son, or they have a condo for their daughter. So this is a trend that we see, and has been pointed out, those condos typically are very moderately priced in many of these new urban areas, so that's a good opportunity. The other thing we see is with the new infrastructure projects coming in from the government, we've got $2.3 trillion in new products coming online. You talked about airlines. The high-speed trains are going to be a tremendous opening up for Thailand in terms of being able to access areas that today take hours are going to be much more accessible going forward, and I think that's going to speed urbanization going forward. We're going to have a number of opportunities. The relationship between Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar, huge potential for Thailand as we go to AAC. We're right in the middle of it all. We're right in the middle. And so with those infrastructure projects going on, that's going to open up more accessibility, and it's going to, I think, continue upcountry urbanization as we go forward. One other thing that I think is worth pointing out, and certainly for us, for Laos, we've seen huge demand. The countries are all very similar in terms of language. With Laos, we've just moved in. We're expanding our position in Laos. We are opening up a JV, providing consumer personal loans and auto loans in Laos. The language is very similar. Our brand names, Supawadee, Krungsri Auto, are already well known in Laos. So it, for us, as a commercial bank, to move into these areas is a relatively low cost and low risk venture because they already know us. So I think you're going to see more of that continue as we go forward. The other question I know we're going to get, and we certainly talk about this a lot with the Bank of Thailand, is the level of household indebtedness. So a recent Bank of Thailand report said 77% we're up to. But I think it's very interesting if you actually look down into some of those numbers. Of that 77%, only 41% is being financed by the commercial banks. So almost half of it is being financed primarily through the government banks, the SFIs, providing farming loans to stimulate support the farmers, to provide loans to SMEs. And so there's tremendous growth going there. They're not all consumption loans. So as we look at that 77%, yes, the number's going up, but it's actually going into infrastructure, going into new businesses, and that's going to continue to grow the economy and to support urbanization as we go forward outside of the Bangkok area. One of the things I think that's worth pointing out for us with our Krungsri Auto franchise, as we look, 62% of our volume now is coming up country, and 30% of that is in pickup trucks. So again, consumer loans, accounts and household debt, but it's actually being used to support and start new businesses, which I think is a very healthy sign. Another sign for us is our Supawadee business, which we consider to be a microfinance business. We've been in this business now for almost 4 years. We've seen our branches grow dramatically. We're now up over 270 branches across the country. 85% of our new branches we're putting in upcountry. There's very strong demand. And more than 80% of the volume, the business we're underwriting, is coming through those channels. So I think there is going to be sustainable growth in those urban areas going forward. Overall, I think just to wrap up for me as we look going forward, I don't think you're going to see the growth in the banking sector that you've seen. We've seen 20% loan growth rates in the last couple of years. We're going to be going back to more of a moderate, what we think will be in the range of 12 to 13% in the medium term. And we think that's very supportable because we see income going up roughly 7 to 8% a year. So I think we are looking at a sustainable. Yes, there's obviously risks, but as I started off, Thailand's amazingly resilient. It is an amazing place, and we're confident that we're going to continue to see further urbanization in the years ahead.
Thank you. Let me have a following question with you. In the second and the first quarter GDP and the second quarter GDP numbers pointed to slowdown in consumption
True.
Do you see those numbers from your business point of view, either Bangkok or upcountries? Just want to gauge whether you see a sign of slowing down or not.
Our loan target for this year is 12%. As we looked at the first 2 quarters, we were actually pretty much on target with what we anticipate. Typically in the second half of the year, because of what we see primarily as consumer demand, we see an uptick in the 3rd and 4th quarter. We are seeing some slowing there, but we are still cautiously optimistic when we look what's going on, that 12% growth rate for this year is still achievable.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Wanchak, let me come back to you about the question about the outlook and risk going forward. As a developer, do you face those challenges of the risks that we talk about and the slowing down of the economy or not?
Well, I think the real estate business is more cyclical. So sooner or later, we have to overshoot things and we have to correct ourselves. In some provinces, yes, of course, we've have some oversupply, and we are doing things to correct that in the sense that we're going to hold back launches until the market is ready for new launches, and then we'll go back again. We're not going to risk ourselves into oversupplying the market. But I think overall demands going forward, I think it's going to be very much depending on the investments, the government's investment, especially in the infrastructures. The 2 trillion baht investment is very important. It's about connectivity. The north-south corridor from China down to Singapore, and east-west from Myanmar to Vietnam. I think it's very important that we have that connectivity, and of course we're going to leverage off the introduction of AEC in 2015. But a few slides after this is actually Thailand is not just the center of AEC. We are the center of many other economic corporations as well. And we think that's going to be more growth in the rural, in the upcountry market than what you see in Bangkok.
Supawadee, I think you have something to add.
Let me add that in addition to all this growth, we definitely have to be concerned if the cities are growing too fast. Of course, I've heard some of the colleagues in the private sector mentioning that there's really some labor shortage in certain kind of skills. So the skill required and the labor that we have in certain areas are not so well matched. So that's one of the challenges of urbanization to come, is how to develop the skill of the labor to serve the need of the growing sector, like in the property. I heard that now construction is kind of slowing a bit in big cities, because we have, for example, in Chiang Mai, the developers have to wait for the big malls to finish first, then they would have the labor to continue on with some other smaller projects, because now there are several big projects going on, so the smaller projects have to wait up to get the skilled labor to handle certain construction processes, because not everybody can do all the construction. So that's one of the labor shortages and the skill mismatch. And of course if the city grows too fast and the infrastructure within the city is not catching up, for example in Chiang Mai now, we have quite a bit of a traffic jam as well, and the mass transportation system there is really a long way to go. We have all this little, the red little, the red bus that we use to transport. I mean, there's really no big bus system, and
small shuttles.
Yeah, and we have tuk-tuk and this red little pickup trucks, transporting people around. So you see a lot of motorcycles growth and many more cars, and it's really jamming up. So the city would have to come up with some real solution for to serve for this, especially if people more people are living in the urban area, because the traffic jam is really it's a cost to the economy. Gasoline and time wasted. So that's just a few examples that it's the challenges that big cities in the urban area would have to handle.
And Kun Wanchak, how the developer deal with that problem in terms of the shortage of labor and shortage of skilled labor?
We've moved away from conventional construction methods. We've started using prefabrication materials much more now, and I think that's a trend. We are primarily residential developers, so most of the residential developers tend to use more and more prefabrication materials now. So be less reliant on the labor themselves. But yes, in certain branches we still use conventional built methods, and we are facing with some delays, but I think it's still manageable. Delays may be a matter of days rather than a matter of weeks or months. So I think it's going to be much tougher as we go forward because of some of the labor force will probably be taken away because we go into in the infrastructure construction as well. So we have made a move away from conventional built.
Thank you. And Kun Janice, you have any last word to add to what we discussed today in terms of that?
I guess I'd just like to wrap up by saying thank you for the opportunity to come. I think this event, I've been several years, this is a great event. I hope you all take advantage of it because I think Thailand really is a land of opportunity as we go forward. There's a lot of opportunity for further growth, and you're going to continue to see that not only in Bangkok, but upcountry.
All right, thank you. I think we have very fruitful discussion today. Can we please have a big round of applause to our panelists today?
All right, thank you very much for another insightful session so we could see the opportunities to invest in upcountry or urbanization theme.